Hey Nutrition, this is our first lesson and it's on food safety and the history of food labels and regulation. And I thought it was appropriate to start this out with a look at our survey results from a few days ago. When I asked you where you get your nutritional advice, most of you, around 75% of you, said that you get some advice from nutritional labels. And I think that that's fascinating. First of all, because nutrition labels don't really give us advice, they give us information. And the cool part is that you already have some understanding of what to do with a nutrition label in order to feel like it's advice now when you look at your food choices. And we are very fortunate in America to have a really standardized food label. And today we're going to discuss where that food label came from and why it's important and what food labeling has looked like throughout history. I do think it's always valuable to look back at history and see where things have been. And this is going to be very brief because I'm not a historian, unfortunately. But there were just a few brief moments in history that I think are important to look at in terms of this topic. So good job. This survey turned out perfectly because I knew most people took advantage of nutrition labels. I just needed to see it. Also, you guys used a lot of friends, family, and social media. We're going to talk about social media. That's a big one too. But the nutrition labels, again, they don't really offer advice. They just offer information. And it's kind of cool that people chose nutrition labels as advice givers. That was neat. Okay, food safety, regulation, and labeling. Let's get started. This is going to be brief. I think that, as I said, I'm not a historian. So anyway, we're going to start in 13th century England, which is the 1200s. There was a first recorded regulation of food, and it was the assizes of bread and beer. And it was a regulatory statute that basically told bakers how much they were allowed to charge for bread and how much they were allowed to keep as profit. It was basically a way to keep them from increasing prices so much that the average person couldn't buy bread. And I'm sure you have an idea of history of food already, maybe, but in case you're not familiar, bread has been a staple of every single class of humans for the last millennium. And you've got, whether you're low class or middle class or upper class, it doesn't really matter. Bread has always been a staple. And this assizes of bread and beer also limited beer, by the way, but it kept prices within affordability for everybody. Bakers were required to mark their bread, and they needed to show which bakery produced it. That was an important regulation. They also were regulated on what type of flour they were allowed to use and how much money they were allowed to charge for each type of flour. And we're all familiar with white flour and wheat flour being readily available, rye flour, but it wasn't always that way. And it takes work to get flour to be white. And when you have wheat grains, I'm going to move myself maybe over here. When you have wheat grains and then you mill them, you get whole wheat flour. And then the more you sieve it, or the more you sift it, you get pieces of bran and chaff out of that flour, and it becomes whiter. But that's time consuming. And so what they did was bakers were able to charge more money for white bread. And that was also regulated by statutes in England. Now we're fast forwarding a long way. Remember, we just did the 1200s. Now we're already in 1850. This was another thing I thought was very important in history. This was the death of President Zachary Taylor. Now what happened was he went on a picnic, had some fruit and some iced milk, and somewhere along the way one of those things was contaminated, and he ended up getting very sick with a digestive problem and died of stomach ailments. They said it was very like dysentery, and they couldn't really figure out what it was. There have been people saying that he was assassinated, that maybe he was poisoned with arsenic or something, but they recently dug him up and did some tests and couldn't find justification for the arsenic thing, though they couldn't disprove it either. So I don't know, whatever you want to say. But assuming that this is food related, and back in the 1850s, it was assumed it was food related, that brought to the forefront of the American mind that maybe food safety was something we should look at to regulate as part of government. And so Abraham Lincoln in 1862 founded the Department of Agriculture, and that was the first step toward regulating the food that America eats. Now, that was America. In Victorian England in the late 1890s, again, the white bread was more expensive because it indicated that more sifting had gone into the processing of the flour, and that took time, so they charged more for it. And what was happening was bakers found it profitable to take other white substances like plaster of Paris or chalk and add it to the bread. And what that did was it made the bread white. They could use cheaper flour, they could still make the bread white, and they could still sell it at a larger price, at a higher price. And of course, that was a giant disservice to the public, because people who were buying this white bread expected that they were getting nutrients from this white bread, and instead they were getting like some flour, but a lot of like plaster Paris and chalk and alum and other materials. And it made it really unhealthy to eat that bread. It's not that it was poisonous, because that stuff is kind of inert. You know, it can go through your body and it doesn't hurt you. But what does hurt you is the fact that you're not getting the food that you're expecting to receive. And in Victorian England, especially for the poor, that was a matter of survival. So this led to malnutrition among children. Another thing that led to children being hurt in Victorian England was that when sour milk, when milk would be so old that it would sour because it would have so many bacteria in it, some people in dairies found a way to add boric acid and make that milk not smell anymore. And so they added it to the milk as an additive to make it not smell when it got bad. But the issue was that it was still bad and it still contained bacteria. And so it's estimated that like 3 million children died of tuberculosis and stomach ailments simply by drinking milk that smelled okay, because we kind of use smell as an indicator for food contamination. This milk was contaminated, but they masked the smell. So again, this points out a very important need for food, not only regulation, but labeling about what's in it so that you can tell what you're actually consuming. Now we're just going to go through some brief laws here. In the 1960s, there was a standard food label, but the use of it was optional. Then in 1967, there was the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. This required commodities to be labeled. They needed to have the identity of the commodity and the name of the business and the manufacturer, the packer, the distributor. So that was all set. But the food nutritional value was not extended in the FPLA until 1973. So in 1973, that's when we started to regulate and actually require companies to put nutrition facts on labels. So the FPLA is currently administered by the Food and Drug Administration. That's called the FDA. Stephen Hahn currently is the commissioner of the FDA, but as we know, things change. So if you're watching this video 5 years from now, he's probably not the commissioner anymore. But the FDA does regulate food as well as drugs, cosmetics, and medical devices. This is an early food label. This is the way food labels were actually when I was growing up in 1984. When I was born and when I was little, I remember looking at labels that looked like this. So the label was very standard, had the ingredients at the bottom, had some vitamins and minerals listed, as well as their percent daily value, percent of the recommend daily value for adults. And then they also included portion size and portions per container and calories. So this is already a very early but recognizable iteration of our food labels. Now in 1990, there was another act in the United States, the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, and it declared that food was misbranded if the label didn't include the serving size in a common unit of measurement, so you couldn't give the serving size in some random unit of measurement that people aren't familiar with, the number of servings per container, the number of calories per serving, derived from fat and saturated fat too, amount of total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium, carbs, complex carbohydrates, sugars, total proteins, and dietary fiber per serving. And of course, they needed to have the vitamins and minerals and other nutrients as well. And of course, throughout history, we've also been developing food safety guidelines too. All countries today have food regulatory laws that regulate food quality, safety, transparency of ingredients, water supply, inspection, certification, labeling, and enforcement, and penalties for offenses. All countries have this. It's not just the U.S., and we're very lucky that we do have this because it ensures that our food is, to the knowledge of the government, safe. Now here's what a modern nutrition label looks like. We can kind of compare it. You can see they added some horizontal lines and some bolding to make it easier for people to recognize things that they might be looking for. This label, again from 1978, is kind of confusing. It gives these things to you in grams, which not everybody uses grams. And it's also kind of hard to orient yourself the minute you look at the label. These labels, however, are a lot easier to orient. It does still give you values in grams, but it also gives you percent daily value based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And then it has nutrients at the bottom. Now, these are actually old labels too, because in 2016, there was a refocus of labeling on things that people in government thought would be a good idea. So they put added sugars on labels, on nutrition labels. And this is important because there's a guideline that says that people should only eat 25 grams of added sugar per day. Now, for example, if I eat this pear contains sugar, but there was no added sugar to it, so I wouldn't count it as that 25 grams. However, this cake mix that I have right over here contains 19 grams of added sugar. So that's per serving, 1/10 of a box. If I ate 1/10 of a box, I would be almost close to my limit of added sugars per day. So those added sugars are important, and they indicate that sugars were added to that food item. And it's not just natural like a pear would be or anything else. And that helps us, again, identify what's in processed foods, especially because processed foods have been manipulated by food scientists and aren't really in their natural state. We also have vitamins and minerals. They were required now to show milligrams or mcg, micrograms, in addition to percent daily value, so people could count how many milligrams or micrograms of a certain vitamin they were getting. Also, since vitamin A and vitamin C are so common in the American diet, they replaced it with vitamin D, which is actually recent studies have shown that Americans are deficient in vitamin D in general, and so they believed that vitamin D was a better vitamin to include on the label of foods just because people might be looking to increase their vitamin D intake. Serving sizes need to be based on what would be expected to be consumed. That's important too, because if I have a candy bar and I eat the whole thing, this is probably going to be expected to be eaten in one sitting. However, if they said, oh, this package contains 5 servings, then the calories, almost everything on the back of it is a lie because I'm going to eat the whole thing. That's what's expected of the candy bar. And of course, it was a clearer format. So I'm going to leave you with a picture of a new nutrition facts label. And you can see the old labels and the new label. And what I'd like you to do is please answer the questions on the attached worksheet comparing those two labels. I hope you have a great day. Good to see you guys. See you later.